Hello 868 YouTube subscribers, you're watching my favorite channel. I am Chillmonger, and I am a man with a bias. This is called X-Men number 1. I imagine there are new fans to this page. Hello, welcome. I've been hating on everything X-Men that's not Jonathan Hickman since like last year, since 10 of Swords. So that's who's reviewing this comic book. It's made by Gerry Duggan, Pepe Larraz, Marte Gracia. We open up with the introduction of a new villain, which is great. I hope they do stuff with him. And he's not Lydia Nance. So his name is File Along, Feilong. Not sure how to pronounce that. And this was a decision that was made by putting two vowels so close together. Don't know how to pronounce the name. Great thinking. You may think it's just a name, but to me it's a deliberate decision that didn't need to be made. So there's this hard to pronounce name, File Along. Now remember that side note in Planet Size X-Men where, these humans, Magneto was like, they just think, they have the imagination that they were going to take Mars someday, somewhere in the future. This is the guy who was going to do it. His whole life's work was done by these mutants and their abilities. That's pretty good motivation to hate somebody. Not that there's any good motive, you know what I mean, but it's a good motivation for a villain, so right on. Now we get to another disappointment, which is a tree. X-Men Gold, I mentioned Lydia Nance. They also introduced mutants living in New York. This is a lot, it means a lot to me. This is a shift, moving from the moon down to the tree. And in such a short time, remember, time in comics doesn't move as quickly as time in real life. And there's going to be a panel where it seems like the people in charge of this comic don't understand that. But they just moved from home to Krakoa straight to the moon. Now they're back in New York. There's just a whole lot of movement that's happening that's unnatural to me. Plus, living in New York of all cities, come on, we have years of this NYC bias that is continuing. We are honoring a poor tradition of Marvel where everyone lives in that city. There's just so many questions. Like whenever a fight happens, I'm gonna be asking, where's a Spider-Man? How about the FF? They can't always be in space. We got the Daily Bugle in New York, and their lead reporter, head top smart guy investigating, says, what about Jumbo Carnation? I could have sworn I was following the death of Jumbo Carnation. And Scott has got to be pretty vague because the resurrection secret isn't out. This means to me that the jig will be up and all people will know about the mutant resurrection protocols. Remember how in Way of X, the mutants, the young ones, were just killing themselves like it's a fad? So they are being irresponsible. This is a secret that should be blown relatively soon. Way of X gets mentioned here. Something Arbor Magna gets mentioned, so that's the X Factor getting a nod. We had some references to other comics here, like X Corp. This was a collaborative, at least for the first issue, which I'm not going to be fooled by everybody. So it was the first week of Dawn of X. But for today, yeah, it was very new. It was also new reader friendly, but it was also collaborative. We're introduced to Polaris. We know X-23 is on the team, who they're trying to call Wolverine. So here's the deal with Wolverine. I could imagine that it's to elevate Laura. They're trying to tell you guys that she's good enough to be a Wolverine. And it's a substitute for a woman is good enough to be a man. That one I don't disagree with. Yeah, if anything a man can do, why not? A woman has the same superpowers. Well, she could accomplish the same things. Why are we discriminating when it comes to superpowers? That's weird. It's not like, how the Olympics, they gotta separate women from men because of speed. Who's to say there can't be a quick speedster who's a female? It's superpowers, so I'm good with that. But she also has her own identity, and it's X-23. She automatically becomes the second Wolverine when this happens. Is Wolverine out of the picture? Is Logan no longer here anymore? And Marvel wants to actually commit to this the same way they did with what Carol Danvers did when she becomes Captain Marvel. There is no other Captain Marvel there. Okay, cool, but the name is not vacant, and she's already got her own identity. Elevate X-23. If the reason for making her called Wolverine in this comic is to make her elevated, it's not working for me. It's making her secondary to me. She's already a clone, so it's bad enough. But now she's got to dress like him and call herself Get Called Wolverine. I'm going to resume with X-23. There's a white page which mentions that Tempo was in the running. She almost became an X-Men. I wonder if that means she had the second most votes. Could be nothing. Now Rogue is on the scene. She says, "You were right on the money, Jean. I clocked it over the water and wasn't too worried until it changed direction toward the city. Whatever it is, it's not too big, honey child." That's what she said in her Rogue voice. I love the way Rogue doesn't say I, the letter I. She goes AH. Yeah, that helps me. I was reading a Batman comic. I know Batman, right? I was reading Batman, and I was listening to it in Kevin Conroy's voice. Actually, it was Justice League, because Naomi was in it. I like Naomi. Shout out to Comic Boom for putting me on, DC. But I love when I can hear a voice as it's being, spoken. So that's probably not credit to Gerry Duggan. That's probably credit to the guy first guy to ever do that, whoever invented Rogue. Much love. So Rogue's facing this giant villain, this villain of the week issue number 1 special, where we got this big obstacle to overcome. It's really big. And, they're in New York City. Like I said, where are all the other heroes? A meteorite just fell. They show up a little late. But at least they made it sound like they were going to show up. Well, Avengers just missed them. They have teleportation, but we're on our way. Yeah, I guess the Quinjet was the mode of transportation this time. The Fantastic Four live in New York City, so they could have been there really, really quick. The Human Torch at least could have been there really quick. That's the problem with having heroes in New York. The mutants assemble. Polaris is leading the charge, actually, but Sync is the MVP here. He's using everybody's powers. He says, "Let's make this Forge Megazord," because I still got his powers in my memory. And Forge is really cool. Sync is really cool. They come up with an idea that's really cool in incorporating Sunfire, and it's like a Megazord. Mutants win. Great celebration over here by Pepe Larraz that he's illustrating. We cut over to Game World. I want to say this is the same planet that Wolverine, the actual Logan, took Quentin Quire to back in X-Men and the Wolverine and X-Men. Maybe it's not. Someone correct me. So they placed a bet on Earth. They're like, these guys are ready for a higher form of war. They took Mars. Their solar system's advanced. They can take it. We got to stop them here. And there's people putting out bounties on Earth. The contest is simple. Beat the Earthlings, but leave the planet. I can't stress that second part enough. There's no sense wasting a good planet already in a habitable zone. Okay, we got 2 threats over here. We got that Earthly guy, whose name I forgot, because the letter E and the letter I was right next to each other, and that's all I remember from it. And we got these aliens from Game World. His name is Cordyceps Jones. We got a white page, which I don't have a strong opinion on this, but I have many opinions on this. We're continuing the tradition introduced by Jonathan Hickman, when clearly there is a rift. So why honor this Jonathan Hickman tradition? Is it as if to say, take ownership of it and say, this is ours now? Alright, cool. This one here, this is from the desk of Ben Urich. They like writing. I'm going to skip everything until the 3rd paragraph. Conservative talking heads have been... Now, of course, there's going to be conservative readers who are going to identify as conservatives and see that Ben Urich is portraying them as against the superheroes of the X-Men. And they're looking at this like, man, this is... You know what? They talk about this diversity. How about diversity of, wait for it, of opinion? You didn't think of that, did you? All these Marvel comics. It's these new comics. I want my old comics. Are they in the attic or the basement? Mom, where do I keep my old comics? End scene. Next page. Deep in underground New Jersey. I'm not familiar with the underground evil part of New Jersey. Is this where Kamala Khan's villain, the Inventor lair is? It is, but it's probably not the same one. There's people who are, again, they're fearful. And he goes, we must establish new upper thresholds for what these bodies can survive. How much pain must our shells endure as we try to survive, as we try to strive? These guys are trying to live and outlive the mutants, and that's the science experiment happening down here. The artwork looks good here too. The villain to me is unknown. It could be Ben Urich for all I know. Maybe I'm supposed to know and I'm missing out. Comment section, help me out if I'm missing out on who this is. But the very final panel, not a tombstone, but a death certificate, where Jumbo Carnation, date of death, January 2003. I didn't check, but I'm sure that's the Grant Morrison issue of New X-Men where this character dies. Here's the deal though. Who else was introduced, post 2003? Let's say Gold Balls. First time we saw this guy might have been 2012 by Bendis, okay? From 2012 to 2021, that's 9 years. How come Gold Balls hasn't aged in 9 years? There's characters like mutants who were introduced during that Academy X era, which was years ago. They're teenagers still. They should be double their age if we're going by Jumbo Carnation died in year 2003. The mental gymnastics that I gotta do to make this make sense don't make sense. These characters can't die with a date on it. There's a reason why tombstones are fuzzed out all the time. And you know who is on this comic book? A guy named Gerry Duggan who's been writing comic books forever. Who else is in the credits of this comic book? The head of X, Jonathan Hickman. Nick Russell, who was in charge of production. Annalise Bissa, who's our associate editor, who didn't think there was anything wrong with that. There's Jordan D. White, who was the editor, who didn't think there was anything wrong with that. C.B. Cebulski signed off on this because he's the chief, editor-in-chief. I don't put anything on Stanley and Jack Kirby. You guys are good with me. But it's such a ridiculous mistake. It's also a minuscule mistake, but it's a mistake nonetheless that went past 6 people. Pepe Larraz too. Pepe, you need to know better than that. You can't put dates on comic books because things get outdated real quick. I was mad, this is consistent with me, because I was mad at Captain Marvel when she went to the future. Now, they could have just said she goes 30 years in the future, but they had to go and say it's year 2051. What's wrong with just saying 30 years later? Because one day it's going to be 2050. God willing, I'm reading this comic book, and it's the date that they're talking about in the future. It's weird. Iron Man 2020. It's weird because we got there to 2020. It's such an error. Even the 2099 stuff. They picked a date way in the future, but hey, Marvel doesn't look like it's slowing down, and there will be comic books in 2099, and there's Miguel O'Hara comics are going to look weird. Now, as far as the X-Men go, couple new villains introduced in here, a good issue number 1. However, I don't have hope for these guys, especially with the editor criticism I just gave you guys. I don't think that this can be sustained, so I'm pessimistic about it. I hope everyone who's going to enjoy this X-Men stuff enjoys this X-Men stuff. I'll be back to review more X-Men stuff here and there, but I didn't get issue number 2. I didn't subscribe to that, so it's not going to be in my pull list. Probably not going to be reading X-Men issue 3 either. Maybe the next little event I'll be back for a bit. But, for Inferno. I'll be back for Inferno, guys. If you like my X-Men takes. If you're up on this, please explain why. Be more positive. This is a pretty negative video. Help make the world better by adding your positive takes to this review. I have been chill. Thank you for joining. I have a Patreon account where you can pay me to read comics and review them. There's a Teespring account also. Other than that, wait for a good comic to come. Black Panther, I'll be back for that one. Black Panther issue number 1. Peace out.